Hello everyone, Brandon here with Slakker Racing, and today we're doing some valve spring analysis or some failure analysis. Got a good friend of mine here, Aaron White with Green Shorts Performance. Aaron, tell us a little bit about Green Shorts.
Yeah, so I know it's an interesting name. It's something I kind of put together back in 2020 where I always had this joke with my buddies that when I was in college, I always had these ugly pair of green shorts that I would go to work on cars with because I didn't like them. And so that just kind of became the joke, and that's where the name kind of stuck from. And so I do a little bit of everything that I possibly can. It's a lot of EFI tuning, and I race with my buddies and doing product development with my friends and with you, and Ben Schrader's Delta Lambda group. And so honestly, I just use it as a platform to do as much as I possibly can with anything race cars.
And you have a unique background in that you have quite a bit of failure analysis experience, right?
Yeah. I've unfortunately seen a lot of broken parts out of a lot of different engines. And so kind of lent itself to, once we got hooked up, we could talk about some of this stuff and try to make some sense out of it.
All right. Well, very cool. So we've got a couple of valve springs that we're going to look at today that Aaron has analyzed for us. So what I want to talk about is a failed valve spring out of a 991 engine. And the 9A1s are considered one of the, better, higher quality, less prone to fail Porsche 911 engines over the years. But one thing that does happen is they do tend to get broken valve springs. And so I was fairly excited to have an opportunity to have you take a look at this, since it is something that's somewhat, I wouldn't call it common, but if there is a failure, it's one of the more common ways that they would happen.
I can't speak to why all of those spring failures occurred in the other engines, but I can definitely tell you why this one broke. And so if you look at the center of that kind of a fisheye right there, there's a nice region that you kind of see, that larger circle that circles around where it kind of points out to or points back to that center. Basically, there's a non-metallic inclusion there. And so a non-metallic inclusion means it's something that got included into the steel whenever it was made that is not steel. It's just a defect that you would think would be fairly harmless. Like if you were grinding into this part, you would see a little spot of porosity, right? Not anything that you would think too much of, except for when it's parked in that particular location, just subsurface on the ID of the part. That's where you're going to have a problem. It acts as a stress concentration. It's like an internal notch. You can imagine if you just had a piece of steel that you notched it and then you bent it over your knee back and forth and back and forth, it's going to break in the notch. And that's exactly what happened here on this particular spring. It's just, unfortunately, that notch is subsurface and not something that you can even inspect for. Even at the highest level of springs, it's still a problem, mainly because of the inspection side. There's no way to identify whether that particular defect is there or not. It does come down to trying to source higher quality material and having the steel mill go into great detail to try to make a better steel for you to make your parts out of. But ultimately, it's a smoking gun after it fails, but it's nothing that you can see until it's in two pieces.
Wow. Okay. So just so I understand, so it's a foreign contaminant of some
Yes.
type got into this spring during the manufacturing process.
Right.
Is that common in OE
Yeah.
or high level OE springs?
Well, so there's this component that goes into that, which is also stress. So if you think of it like this, you could have a fairly large inclusion or a fairly large notch, but if the amount of stress that you're putting into the part is fairly low, then it's never going to become a problem. As you go up in stress, as your design becomes more and more aggressive, as the engine RPM goes up, as the lift goes up, as everything becomes more and more aggressive, as the farther into racing type applications you get, the more stress you're going to have, and therefore they're going to be more susceptible to non-metallic inclusion. So I can tell you right now, the likelihood that your street car has got an inclusion or 100 in every spring that it's got in it is probably pretty high. But the nice part is that typically the lift is low enough, and the design itself is safe enough, has enough safety factor built into it that it's rare for that to happen. Not impossible, I have seen OE level springs in OE cars with 200,000 miles on them that have broken springs from inclusions. It does happen, but they're much, much fewer and farther between than the guy that's going to go out and be racing his car every weekend that's got aftermarket camshafts and higher lift, cams and aggressive valve springs. That's when you're really going to start seeing those types of issues pop up.
So for these engines particularly, which, it's a street engine, but it's a Porsche 911, so people typically drive them aggressively or
Sure.
come out on track. Do you think that finding an upgraded valve spring kind of above and beyond this would be a good idea for those type of conditions? Or
it would. The biggest thing there is for your spring manufacturers to go back and like sourcing the material is very hard, right? Because there's only a handful of places that make steel, and then there's an even smaller handful of places that will make wire. And so making anything custom is extremely prohibitive. What they can do is you can pay for more compressive stress, for more shot peening, for more polishing, for more processing, for more work to go into the parts in order to try to mitigate the propagation of a problem. You're not necessarily going to be able to get the inclusion out, but you can at least try to make it not show its ugly head.
And I've also heard about cryo treatment. Some people are cryo treating springs after the fact. Is that a good idea? Or
in my opinion, that's not a good idea. The cryo treatment really should be a continuation of the heat treatment process if you're going to do it. And I always generally tell folks that, especially for something like a valve spring, there's not really a case I can think of that I would recommend modifying or doing anything to those parts, having not known what already went into those parts. If you know what the process is, maybe you can make a good educated decision on some way to make it better. But once someone submits a final product to the market, they've done what they think is the correct order of operations in order to give that spring its best opportunity. The recommendation that I would have is, if you want a better part, pay more money, not try to do something at home yourself, or even after have a shop do something after the fact that you really don't know the history of what's already gone into that part. That's just my opinion. Cryo treatment has its place, but in this particular process, it really needs to be done very early in the steps.
All right, got it. Well, really appreciate it. That was hugely insightful, Aaron. Appreciate you sharing your knowledge and experience with us. And as we get more valve springs, hopefully we'll have you back and have you.
Hopefully they're still in one piece whenever we talk about them next.
That was kind of cool, huh? If that's the first you've ever seen, then you're welcome to keep.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to also have them not be cracked. I hope we're talking about good valve springs the next time that we're talking. But yeah, that is a very impressive one, and it's for sure a desk ornament. Now I'm hanging on to that one.
All right, sounds great. Thanks again, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks.